just remind our listeners then of the case that's actually going on right now?
What Prince Harry has to prove is that phone tapping and other unlawful activity that he accuses Mirror Group newspapers of was responsible for these stories that he complains about. Some 33 stories have been chosen, if you like, as test cases in his case, and he is being cross-examined on whether these stories came from phone tapping or from perfectly legitimate journalistic sources, such as briefings by his communications officer or just simply picked up from other newspapers.
Now, we know he's not a fan of the tabloid press, but he also doesn't seem to be a fan of the government, saying that both are at rock bottom. What did you make of that?
Well, that was a very interesting passage in the end of the 50-page statement that he made. It's a formal statement. It's formally admitted in evidence. And what he says is he first of all describes what is necessary to save journalism as a profession. Journalists need to expose those people in the media who've stolen or hijacked the privileges and powers of the press. And he says it's a huge problem that he has experience of, a unique perspective, having had a front row seat. And then he says, on a national level, our country is judged globally by the state of our press and our government, both of which I believe are at rock bottom. Democracy fails when your press fails to scrutinise and hold the government accountable. Now, this is his view, and we're not surprised it's his view. It's certainly surprising that a member of the royal family, even somebody who is living abroad, should be criticising the government in this way. He does actually go on to say, I may not have a role within the institution, as he calls it, but as a member of the British royal family and as a soldier upholding important values, I feel there's responsibility to expose this criminal activity in the name of the public interest. The country and the British public deserve to know the depths of what's actually happening and will be better off for it. So these are his views, and he's fully entitled to his views. Whether he's entitled to put those views in a witness statement to the High Court, which means that they're privileged, we can quote it, and whether that's actually going to improve his case to prove what he accuses the Mirror newspapers of doing is quite another matter.
Well, this wasn't the kind of cosy sit down with Oprah Winfrey, was it? And Prince Harry didn't have control of the narrative. But he seemed to be calling on some of his military training. He'll have been trained in responding to interrogation. And so he spoke very quietly. He was very measured. He was very calm. He gave short answers where he didn't know the answer. As Joshua was saying, he said, well, you'll have to ask the journalist that, or you'll have to ask my legal team. He never gave too much information away. Andrew Green, Casey, had been billed as the beast who could really take Prince Harry down, but actually he was pretty deferential as well in his approach to Harry. He said on a number of occasions, look, we feel huge sympathy for you, Harry, on what you've been through in your life and the impact that media intrusion has had on your life throughout childhood, as we'd heard Harry describe, and into your adult years. This case is more about Harry's emotions and his feelings towards the tabloid press in general than these Mirror journalists.
Yes. Finally, Sarah, if it did emerge over the course of proceedings that close family members or the palace had fed stories to the press, if it officially emerged, because there are many people who obviously suspect that that has been the case for some time, what impact would that have, do you think?
Look, I think it would be very difficult, but we haven't seen evidence of that yet. And although Harry has talked about it in his book Spare, although he's talked about it in interviews, in a court of law, he's got to provide evidence. And that is what he has been struggling with somewhat, on the detail of this case and how he can actually prove his claims. But yes, we heard from the Mirror's barrister yesterday that these stories that Harry is talking about, that he claims, well, how could anyone know that very personal information about me? Andrew Green, Casey, said repeatedly, well, it came from the palace, it came from the Press Association, it came from an interview you gave with another newspaper. But we're not going to see the palace take the witness stand. It is Harry in court. That's remarkable in itself. We've got another half day of evidence. We'll have to see how much more we get. But so far, we haven't had that kind of real killer knockout blow.
Yes.